Now this roast chicken is stuffed, and I'm going to make the stuffing ahead of time with their suggestion, which is to take 4 or 5 pieces of bread, whatever you have on hand, and to cube it up. Mine happens to be white sandwich bread. And we're going to pop this in a bowl. Please note my not wanting to clean a cutting board. So now we have the bread cubed up, and I have 4 melted tablespoons of butter. And now we're going to season this. Of course, we're going to go with some standard seasoning. We have salt. I'd call that half a teaspoon. Pepper. I'm doing about 10 grinds on a coarse setting. I have sage here, which I'm putting in whole leaf. We're going to call it 5 sage leaves. Okay. And savory. Again, it looks to be about a half a teaspoon. Rosemary. All right. Nutmeg for a little something something there. And 1 solid dash of garlic powder. You don't do a lot with garlic powder because the flavor goes a long, long way. Now we're going to, again, clean hands. We're going to mix this together, making sure to break up those sage leaves as we go. Look at that. Isn't that kind of delicious looking already? And then I'm going to put a lid on this and put it aside until it's time to stuff that chicken. Now I make this well in advance because I want everything to get soaked up in that bread and be really heavily flavored. So now we have to make what is called the dredge. What I have here is flour. This is about 2 cups. And we're going to use the same seasoning that we used in the stuffing, except that we're going to add some Bell seasoning, which is poultry seasoning. So there you go with the half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of salt and 8 to 10 grinds of pepper, which is again all according to taste. I'm gonna not waste my time digging in this bottle. I have dried sage. Okay. Garlic, which I'll do 2 doses of that time. Rosemary. I'm going a bit more than I did in the stuffing because there's so much more flour here than there was bread. The savory. So we're upping from a half teaspoon to a full teaspoon. Nutmeg. 3, 4, 5 dashes. Nutmeg is a strong flavor, so I try not to go too hard on it. And you know what? I really enjoy my Bell seasoning. We're going to call that half a tablespoon. And then just like with the stuffing, you know, that old-timey cooking, a lot of things were done with their hands. So we're going to mix this dredge all together, breaking up that rosemary and the sage as we go. We're just going to put a piece of saran over the top just to keep it clean. And we will put this aside until it's chicken time. Now it's been a couple hours since we made this stuffing, and it is time to, by the way, I've washed this chicken out with cold water, removed giblets, all of that. And what you see me doing here is I'm salting the cavity. Now, taking a look in, we're going to take that homemade stuffing with all of those delicious herbs and seasonings and stuff that right in here. Now I want you to take the bits of skin, fold it together, close up this area, and if I knew where my kitchen scissors went, here they are. I have food grade twine here. What I'm going to do is move it so you can see it. First of all, we're going to tie the legs together. I do it this way so that later, when I'm done cooking, I can just take my kitchen scissors and cut it real quick. Now, according to the recipe, we will take half of that flour mixture and dredge the chicken in it. It says dredge, and I know with dredging, you want some sort of a liquid down first. So I did coat this with some olive oil. There, this seems to be about half. Seems coated really well. Now, as with most seasoning, it gets a little better as it sits. So I did this about 45 minutes before I want to put it in the oven. I'm going to foil it off just to keep the air out and put it in the fridge until it's time to cook it. Now, this is a 6.5 pound bird, and it's going to take 2 hours, 10 minutes to cook, and I like to let it come out and rest. The instructions say to set the oven to 450 degrees, and then just before you put the chicken in the oven, you need to bring it down to 350, or at least set it to go down to 350. So I am preheating it to 450 right now. We'll come back in a few minutes, and then I will slide the chicken in the oven and set it back down to 350 degrees. Okay, so now it is time, and I am dropping this temperature down to 350, and the chicken's going in the oven. Now, I am putting this on the bottom rack because I'm going to need a lot of space in the oven for the other things. You may be remembering that we saved a bunch of the flour dredge from the beginning of this recipe. Well, now's the time. The chicken's been in the oven for an hour, and this is what I'm going to call a rather unusual step. So we're going to re-dredge this chicken heavily with this flour. Now, evidently, ooh, flour dust. Whew. The purpose of this is to create the gravy. So now that I have this covered with the flour dredge, the instructions are to pour a cup of boiling water over the top. Well, now that certainly is interesting. Just for my own sake, I'm going to move a few things around here. I just don't think I like it clumping up this much. And it sure is a lot of flour in the bottom. But we're following their recipe, not mine. So, back into the oven it goes. This has at least another hour and some change left. I'll admit, I was skeptical about this method when I saw it in the cookbook, but I figured if this is the way they're doing things at Old Sturbridge Village, I'm going to go ahead and try it. So, here it is. This perfectly roasted chicken. I'm about to pick the whole thing up and put it aside so that I can work on the gravy that should be amazing after this thing seems to have been cooked in such a way as basically just to make gravy. So now all of that flour is in the bottom of this pan, and I gotta admit it looks kind of gross. But we're gonna put a little heat under it, add some water, grab a whisk, see what we can do with this thing. When chicken is cooked, finish gravy by skimming off extra fat or adding flour if needed. Cook to blend, correct seasoning, and serve hot. The last thing I need to do to this is add flour. So what I actually did was I added water. Well, it's not the most attractive gravy in the world, but it sure does smell good. And while this continues to cook, I'm going to go ahead and carve that beautiful bird. Once I got any of the good scrapings out of the bottom of that roasting pan, I went ahead and transferred this over to just a sauce pot. Just that way I can distribute the heat more evenly. It is, as you can see, still kind of on the chunky side, but there really was a lot of flour in that recipe. So we're going to do the best we can to whisk this in, and in a few minutes I'm going to take those potato eggs and roasted cauliflower out of the oven, and my significant other is home, who's in the other room obviously smelling all of this and wondering when it's time to eat. And we're gonna set up some plates as soon as we possibly can. So my oven has a hot spot problem. So when I carved that chicken, I had checked the temperature was good, and then I cut into it and half of it was kind of pink. And then take this perfectly quartered chicken, slide it back in for a good 15 minutes because salmonella sucks. So while that chicken cooks the rest of the way through, I have finalized the gravy. I had to add a little bit of ghee and a little pepper to brighten it up a little bit. It was a little on the bland side, although some people in the house like bland. For the record, I am taking that bread stuffing out of the carcass and sliding it into the oven, just in case.